Hello, my name is Caleb. On most social media, I am Caleb the Spy. Not on most social media. On social media, I go by Caleb the Spy on Twitter, or now X, and Instagram. And welcome to my weekly album anniversaries recap show. And this is for the week of October 28th through November 3rd. I intended to do a live show on YouTube, ended up not working out. You will notice if you are seeing this on YouTube, I'm going to try and get it up on YouTube. It does have episode one up in the corner. I know this is not my first episode on YouTube, but I'm going to try and edit this down and put it out as a podcast as well. So trying to diversify a little, try a couple new things. That is the goal. But like I've been doing for the last couple weeks and want to do regularly, this is a show where I get together, I sit down at the end of the week and I look back at all of the album anniversaries that I have posted over the last week on social media. Why I do the album anniversaries, it started a couple years ago where I just started keeping a calendar of albums I really love because it was a good excuse to look back at them and watch them again, or not watch them, to listen to them again. There's a lot of music to listen to, and so to have that excuse to dive back into an album that you know you love, yeah, always seemed like a good thing. I also just like the history of it. So I started posting those in on Instagram and on Twitter, and it's turned into a super fun activity. And so this is my show where at the end of the week, I come down and sit and talk about some of my favorites, some of the things that stood out to me from this week. And the reality is, social media doesn't always give enough time to do that. So let's jump in and talk about a couple of a couple of those. First things first, though, I do want to talk about a little bit of breaking news. This week, we found out that the Lean Years Tradition will be released on streaming. Jeremy Post, the lead singer of Black Eyed Siva and then Model Engine, put out a little story that talked about the song Anonymous F being remixed and then released onto streaming. And I asked him if it was just that song or the whole album, and he said it was going to be the whole album. We don't have a date yet, but I know for a lot of us that's pretty exciting. That is a great album. It's one of my favorites. I think it's number 10 on my all-time favorite list, and it's been absent from streaming as far as I know. So to hear that that one might be released on streaming, and hopefully there are other two albums as well, but let's get one. Let's start with one. That'd be great. So a little bit of news. I know we don't usually do that on this show, but I thought that was worthy enough to mention. All right, next thing I wanted to talk about was some new music. I think I briefly mentioned this last week, but the Gaslight Anthem released History Books. It's their newest album. They had been on a little bit of hiatus. They broke up for a number of years. I don't know if they broke up or they were on hiatus. I thought it was an official breakup. Brian Fallon put out at least three solo albums as well as a Christmas album. They're all very good. The last one, Local Honey, especially, was really, really good. And I really enjoy his Christmas album, but they've been doing shows together for the last couple of years, really, and they put out a new album, and it is really good. I really am a huge fan of the Gaslight Anthem, specifically that run of the 59 sound, handwritten in American slang. As far as runs go, that one's really, really good. It's tough to beat those three in my opinion. I really like their sound, their nostalgic punk is how I always describe it. I know it's called Midwestern emo sometimes. I don't know if they fall into the emo category, but especially early on, they had a bit of a punk sound that has always just felt nostalgic to me. Anyway, the history books, I think it's really good. It's not their best album by any means, but it's a very, very good album. I really like when they get kind of big and anthemic. The more anthem punk songs that they do, I usually find that to be my favorite parts of their album. When they really slow things down, just less interesting to me. Again, when Brian Fallon did it on his solo stuff, that felt good. But I really do like when they're kind of going bigger. And so probably my two favorite songs on the album are Spider Bites and Little Fires. Both of those are just songs that a little faster, a little hard rock, a little harder, and I really like those. Again, when they slow it down, it's just not quite as interesting to me. There's also some really interesting lyrics. I think that's a definitely a characteristic of this band, and some really interesting lyrics that on there, just talking about if I could relive my life or things like that. Just feels like a solid album. It's absolutely worth checking out. I would strongly encourage you, especially if you're a fan of the band and you may have missed this one. Bruce Springsteen makes an appearance on the title track "History Books." That's a really good song, but absolutely worth checking out. So that's the only new music. There's a couple things that came out this week that I might talk about next week. But not a ton of other new things coming down the pipeline as far as I know. So let's start talking about some of the old things. All right, the first album that I want to talk about is actually an album that is, I would describe as new to me. So again, I started making this list of album anniversaries, and I took suggestions from people, and this is one of the bands that was suggested. I believe it's pronounced Copeland. They are a band that this album that they put out was Eat, Sleep, Repeat. Originally in my notes, I had this as East, Sleep, Repeat. So I believe I got it right with Eat, Sleep, Repeat. Came out in 2006. And this is kind of, I would describe it as the 2000s piano emo. To me, it sounded a lot like May. Maybe it's mostly the vocals, but kind of had that feel. And real honestly, I know they're not a band that claims to be a Christian band, but I think they are. I think they seem to really be in that area and in that space, whether they like it or not. And a lot of this, I was very much out of the Christian scene by 2006. I definitely wasn't looking for new bands. And this emo stuff has never really hit me. We joke about ska fatigue. I get emo fatigue, I think. I like The Everglow by May. That's a good album. It I think it's the overwhelming concept of it kind of can uh, keep my focus. But this was just okay for me. I didn't love it. It's fine. Clearly talented individuals, but just didn't really blow me away. I think for some of these bands, I, for me to really connect with a band, I feel like I need at least one song to really blow me away, to really make me feel like, wow, I need to listen to that song again. I need to put that on repeat. And I think that's what this might be lacking. It just doesn't have that blow me away song. And so by the end of it, I'm feeling a little run down by it, a little bored by it. So I'm gonna keep on trying them. I want to look at a couple more. I have a number of their albums on my calendar, and so I'm gonna keep on trying and see if I can kind of find that track that maybe really sucks me in and makes me want to go a little deeper. But it was an interesting. I'm glad I listened to it. So Copeland's Eat, Sleep, and Repeat. That was or Eat, Sleep, Repeat. I don't think there's an and in there. That was my kind of new to me album that I thought I'd talk about because the rest of these are all going to be just personal favorites. So trying to find a little balance on the show. So let's move on. Let me readjust my notes here, and let's move on to the album, the 2014 release by King's Kaleidoscope, "Becoming Who We Are." This is number 14 on my all-time favorite list. I loved this album when it came out. Ironically, this is technically their debut record. They had a couple small releases before this, a couple EPs, but this is kind of their debut album, and I still think it's their best one. I've liked some of their other ones. I really do like them as a band. but this still is my favorite album by them. The first three songs are just almost perfect. It starts with Glorious, Seek Your Kingdom, and I Know. All three of those songs are lyrically interesting, sonically diverse and interesting. They have live versions of these up on their YouTube channel. Absolutely worth checking out. Just very, very interesting arrangements. Kind of this mix of genres that were really hard to nail down. They essentially kind of fall into the alternative rock pop place, but just very, very sonically interesting in my opinion. The album just doesn't stop though. All Creatures is a great song. Grace Alone, 139 are all great, and then the album ends with one of the better closing tracks that I think I like. It's called Defender. Really amazing closing track. Just a great way to wrap up the album. Strong, powerful song that just really soars. So, Becoming Who We Are by King's Kaleidoscope, one of my favorite albums. Again, number 14 on my all-time favorite list. Next, let's talk about the Electrics. This is, we're going to go to the total other end of the spectrum. 1997, this was originally released on a 5 Minute Walk, a very small Christian record company. But the Electrics, they were fun. I think this is really their only album that was, they may have had some other ones, but this was the only one that was really kind of got a main push in the States. It's just fun. A number of people commented on this album when I talked about it, and "Better Get to Heaven" was the song that a lot of people referenced. One of the lines in there is "Better get to heaven before the devil knows you're dead." So just a fun little group. This album, I remember seeing them in concert only once. It was at a music festival, but just a very fun and unique release that I thought was worth highlighting. It came out in 1997 or 1996. I couldn't nail it totally down. I believe it was 1997, but not entirely sure. Some of these albums, it's hard to nail down an actual release date. All right, one that I do know the release date for, and it was in 2018, is Ethan Luck's "Let It Burn." I've talked about Ethan Luck before. I will talk about him again. He's been in a lot of bands, but I really actually love his solo work. This was really one of his first big releases. He did a Kickstarter for this in 2018 and then released it. And it is very, very good. It's a reggae, slower ska album, and I think it's just got a lot of great grooves on this. It's a very um, the bass drives. It's just got a very very a lot of just strong grooves is how I would describe it. Just very very great. The the title track Let It Burn is great, but there's not a bad song on this album, especially if you like that style of music. If you're not super into the reggae ska stuff, maybe less so, but for my taste, there's not a bad not a bad song on here. The instrumentation, I think, is mostly done by Ethan, and it's very, very good. It's very solid. It's not anything, you know, crazy. It's not this super experimental. There's nothing experimental about this. This is fairly straightforward, but it just is a well put together album, well put together package. This is one I wish I had on vinyl. I was not doing vinyl in 2018, so I don't have it on vinyl and it's long gone by now. And another great push for support those indie artists because I really think he's doing some good work and hopefully we'll see more and more solo work from him in the future as well as maybe some I've seen him join forces. There's a number of people I'd love to see him join forces with, but glad to see Ethan continuing to do his thing. All right, let's get a little weird again. Kind of going serious weird back and forth. Big Audio Dynamite released in 1985. This is Big Audio Dynamite. This was Mick Jones, who was a part of the Clash. This was his band that he formed after the Clash broke up or after he was kicked out of the Clash. I think Mick Jones is very, very underrated. Joe Strummer often gets a lot of the credit for the Clash. He deserves the credit. We call him Uncle Joe in our house, so I have tons of respect for Joe Strummer. But Mick Jones was a lot of the musical inspiration in the Clash. He did a lot of the writing of the music, and my favorite Clash song is actually a Mick Jones song. It is "Trains in Vain," and it's my absolute favorite song by the Clash. And do think Joe struggled a little after the Clash broke up, and just didn't have Mick there, didn't have that balance. There's no way around it. The album, the Clash's last album, the album that shall not be named, it's not good, and they missed Mick quite a bit, I think. And so this was his first band after the Clash. And are all of the albums by Big Audio Dynamite great? No, but there's some great bangers on here. E equals MC squared is the big one off this. Great, great song. You should absolutely go check out that song. I think they're a pretty lesser known band from the '80s when they kind of just disappeared and didn't necessarily have the lasting power. But I really love Big Audio Dynamite. Very unique, very interesting. Was excited to listen to this album again. All right, let's transition up to 2003, and this is For All the Saints by Indelible Grace, their third album. Around 2008, I discovered Indelible Grace, and I discovered all of these groups who were redoing old hymns with new music, and I was absolutely hooked. I mean, just blown away by this. It is still, I think, the best worship in my opinion. It's the worship I wish uh, I got to experience more of. We don't really do this at my church. It's kind of a bummer to me, but this is my favorite form of worship music, and this album might be their best album. It definitely was the album I feel like where they really found their footing as a collective. They really found their their voice and how they wanted to do things. Again, it's primarily one individual. His name is Kevin Twit, who kind of arranges it, and I think writes a lot of the the music, but then it's this collective that comes together to create these albums. And I really felt like they really hit their stride on this one. There's a lot of great great vocalists on this. I'm gonna mess up some of these names, but I did want to try and read them. Matthew Perryman Jones is on this album, Sandra McCracken, Matthew Smith, Emily Deloche, Derek Webb, Andrew Osenga, Laura Taylor, Katie Bowser, and Dan Hasselnight, the Jars of Clay lead singer. He's on this album as well. I think it was the second one they did with them, but just a great collection of vocalists. Really, really strong album, and I think their hymn sing is my favorite just because it's got all the hits on it. But just of their normal regular albums, this is my favorite by far. So that came out in 2003, 20 years ago. There was one other hymns album that came out that I'll just mention, Hymns 4 by Page CXVI. Came out in 2011. Also a number of good songs on that. I Both of those, Indelible Grace and Page CXVI, definitely stay in my rotation. I love the old hymns made new. So there was a couple of hymns records that were celebrated this week. So let's go to the next one, which is uh, MTV's Unplugged in New York, the live album by Nirvana. So everybody knows this album. This is nothing new. It was recorded in 1993, but it actually aired in 1993 on MTV. Right at the end, I think it was recorded in November, and I believe it was aired in December. But then it didn't actually come out as a CD until 1994. And this, by then, Kurt had passed away, and this was kind of the last. They've done a couple other collections here and there, but I mean, I think it was kind of a cultural moment for a lot of us who were teenagers of the '90s. As I mentioned in my post on Twitter, excuse me, this the reason I think this album is so good is because they they didn't play the hits. They didn't try and do an acoustic version of Smells Like Teen Spirit. Instead, they did lesser known songs. They did a number of cover songs that were unique, and I think it was perfect. They did what they wanted to do, and I actually think it was a gateway for a lot of young people then to go check out things like David Bowie and the Meat Puppets and some of these other lesser known acts. Not that David Bowie is lesser known, but maybe lesser known to children of the 90s. And I think it was a real gateway to other things. It's uh, the performance is amazing all the way through. Where Did You Sleep Last Night has to be one of the greatest performances in pop music, in my opinion, in pop music history. Absolutely just gut wrenching and eerie performance. Absolutely great. So everyone's heard of this album. It's no surprise, but it is one of my favorites. I think there's no skips on it, and I have a little thing where in my music collection I'll go through and I'll kind of flag good songs, and I think every single one of the songs on this album is flagged. So a great album. All right, keeping going here, if I can. Bad Religion's No Control. This was released in 1989. I'll be pretty brief about this because the album's pretty brief. It's just a great little piece of punk rock. It's about a half hour long. They fly through, I don't know, 15 songs. This is an album I do own on vinyl, so I thought I'd show off my vinyl of it. And yeah, just a this is what punk rock's all about. Just 1 to 3 minute songs, rip them through it. Great choruses, super catchy. Can't go wrong with Bad Religion's No Control. My favorite album by them. This is an album I was very surprised was not in my top albums list. I missed this one. Totally overlooked it. It has already been put on the list that I'm reworking, that I'm trying to continue to refine. But yeah, Bad Religion's No Control, great punk rock album. Just just absolutely wonderful. Okay. If you don't know, I am a huge Five Iron Frenzy fan. They are my favorite band of all time. On their album Anniversaries, there's a good chance I will talk about their albums. This is the first one I believe I get to talk about. I'll try and make this fairly quick. This is their live album, their first live album, the proof that the youth are revolting. Their album titles were always funny. This is number 66 on my all-time favorite list. Back in the day, Five Iron they were road warriors those first couple years, and this really was kind of almost a treat for the fans. You got to kind of experience what it was like to see them live. They're funny, they're weird, they're goofy, they're self-deprecating. It all comes through, and it sounds pretty good too. It's a lot of their hits. Somebody on Twitter made the comment that they really love this album because it feels like it's a greatest hits album from their early years. And for those of us who saw them live a lot, it was really a treat. They had a thing where you could sign up and your name would be printed in the liner notes as a background singer. I did not get to experience that. I was not able to see them as part of these 11 shows, which is kind of a bummer, but it is what it is. It really portrayed them very, very well, and it was I think a real treat for those of us who are Five Iron Frenzy fans. So that's one that came out. I don't have the date written down on when it came out. I want to say 1999, but I don't know if that's correct. Yeah, I think 1999 sounds right. But I'm not entirely sure. All right, moving on. There's more Five Iron Frenzy to come. I will definitely talk about them as much as I can. So let's talk about mm-hmm or mm-hmm. I don't know how you say this, to be honest. I don't think I've said it out said it out loud very often. By Reliant K, released in 2004. Again, another one I did not write down the date for. This is number 120 on my all-time favorite list. And I also own this one on vinyl. There you go. I was excited to get this one on vinyl. This one got a lot of feedback on Twitter. A lot of people really, really excited about this album, really love this album. A number of people calling it their favorite album ever. It kind of asked for, what's a favorite song, and a number of people just said they couldn't do it. They couldn't pick a favorite. Um, this is on my list again. I said it was 100, number 120. I feel like this might have to move up. I've been rethinking my opinions about Reliant K, and this one might go up a little. And for me, somebody made the comment that they don't like pop punk. I've never really seen them as much of a pop punk band, especially by the time this album comes out. I really just see them as a pop band. Um, and that's okay. And I like them for that. Some of my favorites are Witch to Bury, Us or the Hatchet, Life After Death and Taxes, I So Hate Consequences. I'm the one I'm waiting for, and Be My Escape are all some of my favorite songs, but I tend to agree. I think it's kind of hard to find just one favorite. I really love this album. It was super enjoyable to put on the turntable and listen to this week. So that's or however you say that, by Reliant K. Spelled with an E. Reliant K with an E. All right, one more Five Iron Frenzy one. This is Quantity is Job One, released in 1998. It was the last album with their original guitarist, Scott, who came back to the band later. This is, although it's an EP, it's 40 minutes long now. There's a little runtime for a hidden track, but not your typical EP. I think a lot of people don't even really think about this as an EP, but it was leftover songs that they kind of went back into the studio to do, I believe. This is number 26 on my all-time favorite list. I'm really excited to get this one as a part of the Five Iron Frenzy box set and have this one on vinyl. This is, again, it's more than just an EP in a lot of ways. It is known for, of course, the Pants songs, which, as a very, very diehard Five Iron Frenzy fan, I sometimes hate the Pants songs because I would tell people, or people would be talking about music, and somebody would ask, "Oh, what's your favorite band?" And I'd say, "Oh, Five Iron Frenzy," and I would inevitably get the response, "Oh, the band about with the Pants songs?" And I'd always feel so frustrated that they had been boiled down to a joke they made on one of their albums. But nevertheless, I absolutely have introduced my children to the Pants songs, so guilty, I guess. But outside of the Pants songs, this really is just, there's so many great songs on this little. There's only like 8 real songs, and all of them are good. My Evil Plan to Save the World is a great starter. All That Is Good is an interesting song written by Leonore after her experiences on the Ska Against Racism tour, where they toured with a lot of secular bands, and kind of her breaking down kind of how some of that made her feel, and kind of reevaluating just the way she was looking at the world. One Girl Army is an amazing anthem. Dandelions, I think, is the one of their most beautiful songs. I also made the joke that it's probably inspired the most tattoos of any of their songs. And then they have the cover of Sweet Talking Woman by Yellow. That is a great little fun cover. My introduction to ELO, I really like ELO. They've become a band that I really enjoy, and it's absolutely from that cover that I went back and discovered their music. Then there's the Get Your Riot Gear, which is a good song. The words are really great. The music doesn't do a ton for me. And then the Untimely Death of Brad, which of course is about an internet rumor that gets out of hand. The story for that one has always been very funny, but it's really in the last year or so that I've not the year or so, cheapers. It was shortly after it came out that I really kind of started to understand how epic the music is, and it's not Metallica epic, but it's just musically it's a very interesting song. It's a very very fun song. So yeah, the Untimely Death of Brad. A lot of people pointed to that as a favorite song from the album. And then it closes with the Pants songs, and then the Kingdom of the Dinosaurs. And yeah, those pan songs, I still harbor just a little bit of resentment towards the pan songs. All right. So that's Five Iron Frenzy. I'm definitely going to talk about them. They are my favorite band. I love them so much. So let's talk about one more. And this was not one I was expecting. This is just more for the fun of it. And I'm going to mess up how you say it. Oh my gosh, this is going to be embarrassing. So it's by MIA and it's her 2013 album Metagony. I don't know if I said that right. So I'm bringing this one up because I tweeted about this in the afternoon, and that evening, her account, which has about 600, almost 700,000 followers, did a pretty much straight retweet of it, and it got over 200,000 views, which is my biggest tweet by far. I think I had never gone above 35,000 before, so 200,000 followers or 200,000 views on it, which was pretty fun to watch. My son, I was at basketball practice with my son, and I looked down at my phone, and all of a sudden I had 22 notifications, and I was very confused. It's like, what is going on here? So that was fun to see that blow up. I did re-listen to this album once, and then I actually did it again, re-listened again after it kind of blew up for fun. Double Trouble Bubble is my favorite song off that album. It's a good album. It's her style is very unique, very eclectic sounding. There's a couple songs at the end that are kind of duds in my opinion, but it's a very solid album. Her song Paper Planes is probably the one you're most familiar with if you're familiar with a MIA song. It was in the movie Slumdog Millionaire and was a pretty huge hit. So yeah, those were some of the albums I wanted to talk about. I cannot believe how amazing of a week it was. So there's a couple other things I wanted to point out, just how amazing it was. Let's look at just a couple of these. I'm not even really going to go deep at all on these albums. Rage Against the Machine's debut, their album Battle for Los Angeles. Um, what is it? There's Nothing Left to Lose by the Foo Fighters, and it's a it's Hard to Find a Friend by Pedro the Lion, all albums that were celebrated throughout the week. These are all absolutely amazing albums, and I just don't have the time to talk about them. So I'm already a little over the time I wanted to spend. So yeah, great stuff. These are all absolutely worth listening to. I really enjoyed my re-listen of There's Nothing Left to Lose by the Foo Fighters. They were for a long time one of my favorite bands. I still really enjoy them, but yeah, those were all albums that came out that were celebrated this week. They didn't come out this week, obviously. So yeah, and just look at these other ones. I mean, I just throwing up a picture of all the other ones. Um, News of the World, the U2 album. I can't remember what it's called. You Can't Take It With You? That's not right. Their 2000 release that had Beautiful Day on it, Stankonia, just number of albums. If you're listening on the podcast, and just have a picture up of some of the other albums that we couldn't talk about. Just such a great week. So yeah, just a great week of music all around. So yeah, I wanted to say thanks for joining me. If you don't follow me on Twitter, please do follow me on Twitter or Instagram. The only other plug I wanted to make is I love the local libraries. This week I got Dookie on vinyl from the library, which is pretty great. I'm excited to check that out until I can buy my own copy. And then I got this like book on Joe Strummer and his final years. It's like a book it's got all of his albums. I already own all these albums, but it's like a full-on book and then with some CDs in it and just super fun stuff. Lots of interesting pictures of Joe Strummer. I'll show that. So yeah, just a pitch for your local library. If there's music you want to check out, you should see if your library has it, and you might be able to check it out from there and check out a physical copy instead of just streaming it. Just a change of pace. So yeah, that's it for the week of what was it, October 28th through November 3rd. Just so many great albums. Thanks for joining me. If you have not, if you don't follow me on Twitter, please do, Caleb the Spy. And If you don't, yeah, subscribe to the podcast if I get it up and going. Oh, I wanted to mention on the podcast, and I think on the YouTube video here, the music that I'm using is "Sing It Out at Street Level" by Peg and the Rejected, which is basically the Dingees just doing ska songs. So I wanted to. They have this music that's available to use on stuff like this. I did ask if I could use it, but essentially the Dingees just doing straight ska music instead of their kind of mix of ska, punk, and reggae together. And it's good to mention the Dingees because that is probably my most listened artist of the last couple months. I've really been on a huge Dingees kick. They have just continued to skyrocket into the upper echelons of my favorite band. I really love them, and really thankful to be able to get to use some of their music. So this is the instrumental version. So again, thanks for joining me this week, and we will talk to you next week. Thanks for following along.